Hey guys, welcome to Stu Maker. I'm Stu and I like to make things, and today we're talking about iteration versus obliteration. Now, what do I mean by that? So I've been working on my card game called XCal for a long time, and I've iterated and iterated, and I've created all kinds of really good stuff and gotten to a point that I feel really happy about. But there's been an itch I haven't been able to scratch, and I kind of want to talk about it. So the idea is, I don't know, like there was felt like there was something missing and I couldn't figure out what it was. And as much as I iterated and created new designs and kind of reworked it, much like the Apple, iPhones, you get one iPhone to the next one and you're like, everyone makes an incremental change and adds something new, which is really great, really cool. But if there is a bug or a really big problem, it's kind of hard to figure out where that problem came from, when it started, where it started, and how to fix it, especially if you just keep iterating, right? You're never really going to get there. So for my card game, I had to do something I didn't want to do. I had to blow it up and look through the remnants, and I had to catalog what went wrong and look at the black box and do all that kind of stuff and figure out what exactly needs to be changed. So let's jump into it then. I'll start with like a really clear and simple idea here with the card backs, because I kind of want to ease into it. I don't want to go just jump face first into this. As fun as that would be, I just think that I kind of need to set you guys up a little bit for success here. So we got here, I've worked on these card faces and I've iterated on each design. I've changed what it was from like very basic to being kind of like what you're seeing right now, which is kind of like this stained glass, which was very emotional for me as it had a lot to do with my grandma who had passed away prior. And I love the design. I just felt like it wasn't there yet. And so as much as I, loved it and wanted to keep going for it, I knew I had to keep changing it, keep working on it. And the face design has changed quite a lot, even to today, it's changed dramatically. And we got the backs of the cards, which are something else that has kind of like had a bit of a renaissance for me. It started off pretty simple, which was, like a little tombstone. And then it was kind of like the back. I'm not going to go into too much, but just suffice it to say, I changed it a lot. We even got this like very scratchy version of it with like the skull, which was okay, but it didn't feel good enough. You know what I mean? So I kind of went in and kind of created a much more finished version of that. And that is like a simple idea of like iteration. I found an idea and I kept working on it, kept workshopping it, created my brief, and we get to where we are today, which is where the cards look fantastic. It's great. I love the new design, and maybe I'll do a whole video where I talk about that, but just to set you guys up, that's kind of like a little brief example of iteration. So let's talk about obliteration. In my game, prior to today, there were 4 classes, with each class having a bunch of subclasses, right? So the 4 classes were persona, which was your characters, right? You put them on the field. They're not very strong. They have some effects, but they're not like really great. And they're there as kind of cannon fodder to get you where you need to go and some other kind of things, right? And then you got yourselves the mass class, which was the upgraded version of the persona class. These guys were way stronger, had better effects. And as you play, you're going to level up your personas into your masks. It's going to be really cool. I think that works really great, right? And then we had ourselves a Nemesis class, which the Nemesis was a boss card that you would put on your opponent's board at the end of the line for them. So as soon as they got to the end, the boss card would activate and they would have to defeat the boss to win. Same thing for you. Your opponent gets to put a boss card at the end of your finish line, and then when you get there, you have to fight that boss. It's a really cool idea and I really dig it. The reason why I came up with this, as I was playing with the card game, I realized that people would kind of like speed run to the end and win automatically, and that's fine. I think that could work, but I kind of wanted to create more of like a engaging system, and I thought that would be like a really fun idea, right? And now the last class was the fate class, which is kind of like a catch-all term. If you played any other game, it's like an effect card, a spell card, a trap card, a magic card, a land card, things like that. They're not necessarily characters, they're more just effects that you can use or be used by to affect your opponent, yourself, your characters, all that kind of good stuff, right? And that was good. That was the 4 classes and it worked great. And I kept feeling that there was something off though, because for me, there was a big thematic want for there to be 5 of something. In the Persona mass cards, they have a subclasses that they share, which is the Monarch, the Conscript, the Philosopher, the Enthusiast, and the Outcast. those are the 5 subclasses that each character will be funneled into. And the idea is like, personality wise, like who's a monarch is a person like maybe somebody who's more of a leader, more of a king or whatever, queen, all that kinds of good stuff. A conscript is a warrior, a guy or a woman who is more adept at fighting and being a soldier on the front lines kind of thing. The philosopher is the kind of personality type that's more of a thinker, more of a philosopher, more of a scientist, An enthusiast is the subclass for people that are kind of easygoing, kind of lighthearted, kind, kind of things like that. And then the outcast is for the people that are weird and different and maybe on the outskirts of society in a weird way. They don't clearly fit into any of the other archetypes or subclasses, I should say. And the way to think about it is it's like, I'd say like Wonder Woman is probably a conscript. Superman would probably be an enthusiast. Batman, I think he might be a philosopher or an outcast. I think probably outcast. And then like Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four would be like a philosopher. And then like Doctor Doom could potentially be like a monarch, if that makes any sense to you. It's kind of that level of thinking, as how you would put these characters in certain categories and things like that. And that was fun, right? I like that. The Nemesis is just its own. It doesn't really have a subclass because it is its own subclass in a way. And then the Fate had 5 different subclasses, which was how would you basically use the cards, which was like instantly. You could instantly use the card, which is instant. Oath, which is basically when you put the card down, you can have an agreement between you and your opponent, and whoever breaks that agreement gets kind of screwed in the end. And so it's like some of these are high risk, high reward kind of cards you play. Retaliate was a kind of card that you would use when someone did something. Either a character moved, a character battled, or your opponent activated an effect. You can use a Retaliate card to retaliate. You're going against them. And then in the inverse, you have Cease, which is a card that was created because I got annoyed in like other card games where people would have these long chains and there's no way to break them. So in that way, a Cease card is a way to break the chain and to stop the chain where it is. And some Cease cards are pretty brutal. So that was like a really fun idea to be like, okay, I know you're going on this long chain, but here's a Cease card. It's over. It's done. Endo, breako kind of thing. And that was really cool, right? And the last subclass was attach, cards that could attach to characters and do all that kind of stuff. That was 5, right? But if you notice though, there's only 4 classes, right? It doesn't fit the 5 theme. Now, the 5 theme is derived from Arthurian legend and in just medieval chivalry, I guess. It's got the pentangle, the 5 fives, which was the 5 virtues of a knight, the 5 joys, the 5 wounds of Christ, the 5 fingers, and the 5 senses, which are like really cool. Definitely dig into it. That's something that mattered a lot to me when I was working on the game. And so I felt like there was a 5th class that was missing, and I tried to figure out what that class should be. And I kind of wanted to say, so we got Instant, Oath, Cease, Retaliate, and then Provisions was supposed to be like an attach card. An idea for an event card, which would have been really cool. But as you can see, we got Quip, Backstory, Team Up versus Unity, and then Retcon. These were a couple of cards I was kind of flirting with for a while. A Quip was an idea I had that I thought would be really cool. It's like, oh, hey, maybe this is something your character says. But then I thought, like, isn't that just like a Retaliate card? So I kind of like really thought about this and tried to figure out what the hell is going on, because as much as I could iterate, I couldn't come up with a whole new class out of nowhere. I had to break it down. I had to destroy the Fate class to figure out what those cards were not servicing, right? And we got Backstory, which is this idea I had of like a wound or a gash, which is like similar to this like Irish mythology that, like a character could be special in some way, but then it can also have a defect of that specialness, which I thought was like a really cool idea. And so I'd come up with this idea of like a backstory. It's like, oh, a backstory card, which is like, it maybe attaches to one of your guys and it changes what their backstory is. It gives them a really big buff, but also gives them a huge debuff. And I thought that'd be really cool. And as much as I still want to add that in the game because it's not in the game as it is now, I think that'd be really sick. And this took me a while. Like I know, like I only have a few clips of it, but like it took me like a week or two to kind of really sink my teeth into this and figure out what is going on here. And I wrote down so many different ideas. You see me just like crazily writing down ideas here. And it's so crazy to think about, like, as an artist, you can have this sniff test and you're like, well, this isn't passing the sniff test. Like there's something off here. And I could feel it. And I knew I was getting closer to it and I was finding the groove. But I just had to go through the whole process of breaking everything down. I created these note cards and I would write down like what the card could do, what the class could do, what the subclass could do, what would be added, what would be changed, what could fit and be something new. And so I wrote down and I had to break it down. I couldn't just iterate anymore because if I try to iterate, it just wouldn't give me results because you can't iterate on something that isn't there. You need to add something. And sometimes you need to subtract something in order to add something, much like your universe, born from nothing, because you had matter and antimatter and those two kind of met and now you got something, right? And so here I created like a funnel to kind of figure out like, okay, what funnels go down here? There's a board, there's opponents. Okay, we got funnels here. You got you, class, battle, movement. This all like ideas that affect the card game, right? Because the board, like what affects the board? What affects your opponent? What affects you? What affects your classes? And then right there, I think is when I figured out, I'm like, oh, I don't think I have a lot of cards that affect the class abilities, right? Because, or I should be more specific, we don't have a lot of cards that affect the subclasses. And that was a big deal that I had to kind of workshop and figure out because I had these subclasses attached to the Persona and Mask cards, but there was nothing that took advantage of that. So I thought, okay, I think I'm getting somewhere. I think what I need to do is to have something that affects them specifically. And so I wrote down, I did like a whole thing here. And I kind of broke these down. I did little notes and I kind of moved them around, try to get them in the right place, do this whole thing, get them there. And that was something that was definitely needed. I needed to kind of break down in my brain, in my head, to kind of see it. And sometimes if you're struggling with something and it's in your head and you're like, okay, I need to like figure out what the hell's going on, it's really great to kind of create a physical representation of it just so you can see what's going on. And I kind of moved all the subclass cards around to see what the hell each one did. I'm like, okay, nothing affects the land and field. Barely anything affects some of these other ones. So where do we have too many cards going affecting things, or where do we have not enough? As you can see, the characters kind of have like a bunch of different cards that could have affected them. And that was something that took a lot of time and a lot of effort to figure out. What I ended up figuring out though was creating a will type structure. And will class is this representation of our will as people, right? The way I would describe it is that, there's a will to power, like Friedrich Nietzsche say, and there's also, Man's Search for Meaning, which is a really cool book. And it's this idea that like, no matter how bad something gets, as long as we have a why, you can survive almost any how. Maybe not literally, but figuratively and metaphorically, I thought that was a very powerful message. So we have a fate class, right? Fate class is something that affects everybody and all that stuff, and that's cool. But what I decided to do is that fate cards would be predominantly negative. They could be positive, but for the most part, they're affecting you, your opponent, and your opponent's characters. But the will cards are things that are derived from us, derived directly from our being. And that was a big kind of eye-opening move for me to think about the will cards as our expressions of our will and taking control of our own destinies and moving forward in that context. So the will cards of today are now Mentor. The Mentor subclass for the will cards affect your Persona and Mask subclass, so you can change somebody from a Monarch into a Philosopher, or vice versa. I think that would be so cool. You could change the subclass, which then means you can use other will cards to affect that card that normally wouldn't have been. And the big capper for this is that when your character should be attacked or destroyed, instead you destroy the Mentor card. And I thought that was like a really like good philosophical idea that like, hey, in most stories, the Mentor is the one that dies to save the student, in a way. You think of Obi-Wan and Luke Skywalker, you think of all these other characters, and that's like a thing that's kind of happened in a bunch of mythologies and a bunch of ideas. And I thought that would be really cool and very powerful as a message to kind of get across. We got here our Diogenes card, which says attach to a protagonist and change them into a philosopher. If your protagonist would be destroyed, then destroy this card instead. Very simple card, very effective for me. they don't have any effects other than changing the subclass of your mask and persona cards, which is really, really cool. And it can be a very powerful tool. While they don't give any specific upgrades to the card, it does change the nature of that card, which I thought was very well fitting for that. And I brought the equip cards in, and I thought they should act like retaliate cards, but for the will guys, right? Because now, while they may react quickly, the difference is that they need a specific subclass to work for. And for reference, we got the card here called You Should Run, Outcast, Quick Use. Your leading antagonist must move back 2 zones or to an unoccupied space. So this is really cool. So now, not just being a retaliate clone, the card necessitates you have a certain class to activate. So now if you have an outcast, great, you can use this card quickly. You're like, okay, your leading opponent's character on the battlefield needs to move back 2 zones or to an unoccupied space. That's really cool. But now if you use a mentor card, that could affect the subclass to change them into an outcast. Now you can use both cards rather than just needing a specific outcast. I thought that was really cool because now you have to weigh, do I really want to waste this card on that guy, or do I want to maybe save it, kind of a thing. Because now your mentor is taking up a spot and you've only got 5 spots available. So you really need to think these through. The equip cards could be used very quickly and be flip face up kind of thing. And that's a really cool idea. Now, remember when I was talking about the protege sidekick idea? I decided to call that subclass the ward card. Gives it kind of like a different vibe. It's not just a sidekick. It's not just a protege. It's a ward. It's someone we take care of and we teach. So now instead of being the student, we are now the teacher. We can make our characters the teacher to teach other people. I got right here a really cute card called Khufu. Khufu is the name of Egyptian pharaoh. And now the way the ward cards work is this. The attached enthusiast is healed every 2 turns. If the enthusiast is destroyed, then replace them with this card with a 5/5 strength. So the way this works is that this card now needs a specific subclass to work. In this case of Khufu, it needs an enthusiast. So let's say you have a Eldritch, right? Eldritch is on the field now. And if you attach Khufu to Eldritch, if he gets injured, he can be healed every 2 turns. So every other 2 turns, he can get healed, which is great because now you get a way to kind of like get that nice balance going. But here's the problem though. If for whatever reason your opponents are very strong and they destroy Eldritch, well, guess what? Eldritch is gone, but Khufu can now be on the battleground. Khufu can now have 5/5 strength, not very strong, but now he's there. Now you got a card there that maybe you could sacrifice, use for other kind of things. And it's a really cool and fun idea. And I really love the ward idea because now you're the mentor that dies for the student, in a way. And I think that is such a powerful message. And I know it's a card game, but for me, I think about this metaphorically and philosophically, and I think in this way, I love the way that this is presented. And then we got ourselves the skill class, or skill subclass, whatever. Toxic Love. Your outcast can heal by injuring another protagonist, this turn only. So the idea is that for 1 turn, the skill class affects a specific subclass. So in this case, it's outcast. So all of your outcast characters can heal by injuring another protagonist on your battleground, right? Which is really cool, right? It's a really strong card because if you have a bunch of cards that you're like, okay, I want this card to be healed, but I don't want that card, I think I can switch it up, right? That's basically what this card's doing. And that's really cool. There's different ways you can take advantage of this and have really fun. And that's what a skill card can do. A skill card works in groups, right? It's like, okay, if you have this specific subclass, then you can activate and be used by the skill for this turn only. And I thought that was a really cool idea. Really dug it. It's a way for like the specific subclasses to actually have like an ability outside of their own that they can kind of utilize through the will cards. And then we got ourselves the Union card, which is the last type of will card because we have 5, right? We have 5 classes, 5 subclasses. Baby, I'm loving it. Which this one we're gonna look at is Double Indemnity. Quick, if you have an enthusiast and an outcast, then you can draw 2 cards after an opponent's fate card destroys one of your cards. This is like a very simple card. I know. This is a very kind of like, there's a lot of like ifs statements going on here. So the idea is that you use this very quickly. And if you have 2 different subclasses, and sometimes they could be the same subclass, but let's say if you have 2 of them, right? You have an enthusiast, you have an outcast, in which case you could have Eldritch or Baphomet. Then you can draw 2 cards. after your opponent's fate card destroys one of your cards, which could be another fate card, another will card, or one of your characters. Now you can draw 2 cards. It's a very, very niche and specific thing, but it's also a very powerful one. It's one that can be used very, very specifically. And those are all the will cards. I've added a bunch of other cards too, which I'm very excited about. I've done a whole redesign and refresh on all the cards that I can't wait to talk to you guys about. Maybe that'll be in the next video where I go through every single design and all that stuff. But suffice it to say, that is kind of what I've been working on and kind of trying to figure out and trying to see like, okay, what the hell is going on? How can I affect it? How can I make this better? What can I do with it? And there you go. So thank you guys for watching so much. I know I didn't film myself. I don't know if you guys really care about that or not. I hope you guys enjoyed my art that I've been drawing in the background. I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's like, I could film myself, but that would be a lot more of a pain in my butt. So I've already filmed this video a bunch of times. I'd rather just get my thoughts across as concisely as I possibly can. I've got a bunch of videos coming. This one took me a lot longer to make because I just couldn't find out how I wanted to describe what I was working on. And, even now I'm still feeling like, I don't know if I made a whole lot of sense, but, honestly feels like a breath of fresh air for me. And, from the connoisseurs of card games, maybe there's a bunch of mechanics that are very much like this, and that's totally fine. But for me, who is a creator and wants an artist and somebody who wants to make something, this just felt so satisfying to scratch that itch. So the next time you're working on your project and you're thinking to yourself, hey, should I just keep trying to iterate on what I'm working on, or should I find out what the hell's going on here? Because there's something wrong, something not working, and I gotta break it apart. And you gotta break it down and destroy it before you can find out what's going on. Originally in this video, I was gonna talk about my books and stuff like that, but I feel like the video's going on kind of long. So if you guys don't mind long videos, I could make them longer in the future, but for now, I'll put all on my head. But if you do want to hear about my book and kind of what has been going on with that one, it's been a similar process. I've also had to break it down in a way, and maybe I'll do a video specifically going over that. If you guys want to hear about that, leave a comment down below. Let me know. Like I said, like the video if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, subscribe if you want. This video took forever. I'm sorry about that, but now that it's done, I feel really good, and I know kind of a trajectory of where I want the other videos to go. So either way, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you, I don't know, some other time. Okay, later guys. Peace.